There's a moment in any serious investigation when the data stops being background noise and starts telling you something you weren't expecting. That moment, for a growing number of researchers and data scientists, came when decades of Bigfoot sighting reports were systematically fed into artificial intelligence systems. What came back wasn't chaos. It wasn't the scattered, random distribution you would expect from folklore, mass hysteria, or simple misidentification. What came back were patterns. Tight, repeating, geographically consistent patterns that stretched across more than 60 years of reported encounters. And the uncomfortable truth is this: those patterns shouldn't exist if Bigfoot is nothing more than a cultural myth. To understand why the AI findings matter, you first have to understand where the data came from and how long it took to build. The summer of 1958 was unremarkable in most parts of America, but deep inside the Six Rivers National Forest in Northern California, something was happening that would permanently alter American folklore. A bulldozer operator named Jerry Crew arrived at a logging site in the Bluff Creek region of Humboldt County and discovered something pressed into the soft mud near the construction zone. Footprints. Large ones. They measured roughly 16 inches in length, showed clear toe impressions, and carried a stride suggesting something walking fully upright. Plaster casts were made. Photographs were taken. When the local Humboldt Times published the story, journalist Andrew Genzoli gave the phenomenon a name that would echo through American culture for generations: Bigfoot. The name stuck because the prints kept appearing. Between 1958 and 1963, logging crews working the Bluff Creek and Willow Creek corridor reported fresh tracks appearing overnight with unsettling consistency. Measurements placed them between 12 and 17 inches. The depth of the impressions suggested significant body weight, far beyond what a human boot would leave under comparable soil conditions. Workers began comparing notes across crews. Some reported more than footprints. Heavy oil drums, weighing up to 450 pounds, were allegedly displaced from their original positions. Sections of fencing in remote areas were found damaged in ways that were difficult to attribute to local wildlife. The geography itself was a factor. Bluff Creek sits within a dense network of redwood forests, steep river valleys, and erosion-cut ridges. Logging operations had only recently carved roads through previously undisturbed terrain. This created a unique window of observation. Freshly exposed soil perfect for retaining impressions, combined with minimal human presence and limited visibility beyond immediate range. The conditions were, in the most neutral scientific sense, ideal for ambiguous evidence to emerge and persist without immediate explanation. By October 1967, the Bluff Creek corridor had already been producing reports for nearly a decade. But nothing in those years prepared the public for what Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin captured on the afternoon of October 20th along a sandbar near a bend in Bluff Creek. The two men, riding on horseback through rugged terrain about 25 miles northwest of Orleans, encountered something near the creek that caused their horses to panic. Patterson, carrying a handheld 16mm Kodak camera, managed to film approximately 59 seconds of footage before the subject disappeared into the tree line. That footage became the most analyzed piece of film evidence in the history of cryptozoology. Frame by frame, analysts measured stride length, estimated height and weight, and examined limb proportions. Physical anthropologist Grover Krantz spent years studying the movement patterns in the film, arguing that the fluidity of the gait and the arm extension during stride did not match the mechanics of a human being wearing a costume. He approached it anatomically, not emotionally, and his conclusion was that the footage presented genuine biomechanical puzzles that standard explanations struggled to resolve. Others were less convinced. Critics pointed to the financial pressures Patterson was under at the time, the lack of independent witnesses, and the subsequent complications surrounding distribution rights to the film as reasons for skepticism. No consensus ever emerged. What the Patterson-Gimlin footage did accomplish, beyond any debate about its authenticity, was to crystallize the physical description of the subject in the public imagination. Tall, upright, hair-covered, long arms, a deliberate, unhurried stride. That description would echo through thousands of subsequent reports for the next 5 decades. For years after 1967, Bigfoot reports existed in fragments. They lived in regional newspapers, private investigator notebooks, local radio accounts, and the personal archives of a loose network of researchers who exchanged information slowly and inconsistently. There was no central repository, no standardized classification system, and no reliable method for comparing reports across geography or time. The data existed, but it was useless at scale. That changed in 1995, when the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization was founded by Matt Moneymaker with a specific and disciplined mission: collect, classify, and standardize Bigfoot sighting reports across North America into a single searchable system. The BFRO introduced a case structure that assigned each report a number, geographic coordinates, a date, and a narrative description. Reports were divided into Class A encounters, defined as clear visual contact with sufficient detail to distinguish form and movement, and Class B reports, which covered indirect evidence, such as sounds, tracks, and objects being disturbed, without direct visual confirmation. By the early 2000s, the database had passed 2,000 entries. By the 2020s, more than 5,000 publicly accessible cases had been logged, with additional submissions continuously under review. Washington State alone accumulated over 600 reports, more than any other state in the database. Significant clusters appeared across the Pacific Northwest, through the Appalachian Mountain Range, and in states like Ohio, Kentucky, Texas, and Florida. The database was imperfect. Many reports were retrospective, filed months or years after the original experience. Some were brief and lacked verifiable detail. Investigator mediation during the review process meant that final entries were curated versions of original accounts rather than raw transcripts. But despite these limitations, the dataset was the most comprehensive structured record of Bigfoot encounters ever assembled. And then, researchers started feeding it to machines. The application of computational analysis to Bigfoot sighting data began in earnest during the late 2000s and accelerated through the 2010s as data science tools became more widely accessible. Researchers applied methods drawn from standard geographic and statistical analysis. DISCAN, a density-based clustering algorithm that identifies natural groupings within spatial data without requiring a predetermined number of clusters, was used to examine whether sightings formed genuine geographic concentrations or were distributed randomly. K-means clustering forced the data into defined regional groupings to assess structural organization. Kernel density estimation produced heat maps that converted scattered individual reports into smooth visual surfaces showing where activity was most concentrated. The results were immediate and striking. Sightings did not distribute randomly across forested terrain, as urban legend theory would predict. Instead, they clustered with notable consistency near roads, established trails, and forest access points. In Washington State, where the BFRO database is particularly dense, sighting clusters align closely with forest road networks and recreational access areas. In Ohio and Kentucky, concentrations appeared along rural highway corridors and at the edges of agricultural land meeting woodland. The pattern suggested that whatever was being reported was being encountered not in the deepest wilderness, but at the margins, the transitional zones between human activity and forest cover. The temporal findings were equally structured. Reports increased reliably during late summer and fall, with the July through October window accounting for a disproportionate share of annual sightings. In the Pacific Northwest specifically, spikes in reported encounters aligned closely with hunting season, the period when the highest number of people move into remote forest zones with sustained attention to their surroundings. This correlation could support two very different interpretations. Either increased human presence in the forest creates more opportunities for genuine encounters with an unknown subject, or increased human presence creates more opportunities for misidentification under conditions of heightened alertness and expectation. Natural language processing applied to the narrative descriptions revealed another layer of consistency. Across decades of reports filed by different people in different states, with no apparent connection to one another, certain phrases and descriptive structures repeated with remarkable regularity. References to a large, hair-covered bipedal figure, descriptions of broad shoulders and long arms, accounts of rapid movement toward tree cover, following visual contact, the structural template of the encounter itself, A brief sighting under reduced visibility conditions, ending with disappearance into obstructed terrain, repeated across thousands of entries spanning more than 60 years. Here is where the findings become genuinely difficult to dismiss or accept with equal ease. If Bigfoot reports were purely a product of cultural transmission, meaning people reporting what they expected to see based on prior exposure to the legend, you would expect the patterns to drift over time as the legend evolved and media coverage shaped public perception in new directions. You would also expect geographic distribution to follow media markets and cultural familiarity with the subject, rather than specific environmental conditions. The data does not fully cooperate with that prediction. The geographic clusters align too consistently with specific ecological conditions, dense forest cover, transitional habitat zones, and areas with limited human visibility. The temporal spikes align too consistently with outdoor activity patterns rather than with media cycles. At the same time, the AI analysis cannot tell us what is causing the patterns it identifies. It can only tell us that structure exists in the data. That structure is entirely consistent with a large, elusive animal operating in specific habitat conditions during specific seasons. It is also entirely consistent with a cultural phenomenon that encodes certain environmental and behavioral expectations deeply enough that witnesses across generations produce structurally similar accounts regardless of what they actually observed. The computational tools do not resolve that ambiguity. They deepen it by demonstrating that the ambiguity is not random. It is organized. The history of zoology offers occasional reminders that absence of confirmed evidence is not equivalent to confirmed absence. The coelacanth, a large fish believed to have gone extinct approximately 65 million years ago, was discovered alive off the coast of South Africa in 1938. The okapi, a large mammal related to the giraffe, was unknown to Western science until 1901 despite living in a region that had been broadly explored. Large animals with limited ranges and strong avoidance behaviors can, under the right conditions, evade systematic documentation for extended periods. The dense, complex terrain of the Pacific Northwest, with its layered canopy, river systems, and vast acreage of land accessed by few roads, is precisely the kind of environment where such evasion is theoretically possible. But those examples exist alongside an equally long history of cases where cultural expectation and perceptual ambiguity combine to produce convincing but ultimately explainable phenomena. The conditions most commonly associated with Bigfoot sightings, low light, brief observation windows, transitional zones between open and forested terrain, are also the conditions most likely to produce misidentification of known animals. Bears moving bipedally, elk seen at distance, humans in dark clothing observed through dense vegetation. The AI cannot distinguish between these possibilities. It can only confirm that whatever is being reported follows a pattern consistent enough to rule out purely random noise. That is where the question rests. The patterns are real. The cause of those patterns remains unresolved. 67 years after Jerry Crew pressed a plaster cast into a mud print in Humboldt County, and a newspaper gave the phenomenon its name, the most sophisticated analytical tools available to researchers have produced the same answer that every careful investigation before them eventually arrived at. Something is happening out there in those forests, and we do not yet know with certainty what it is. The data keeps accumulating. The algorithms keep finding structure. And Bigfoot remains, as it has always been, exactly one confirmed piece of evidence away from changing everything we think we know.